What's up, YouTube? Bay Area Baller back again. I'm joined by my man Jesse Naylor of Last Second Sports. Jesse, you're someone who I've always looked forward to watching, and just someone who I enjoy their content, and I'm extremely appreciative of you joining my channel. Jesse, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. That intro is better now that I'm on the show. I love it, man. But yeah, thanks for having me. Listen, when you asked me to come on, I jumped at the opportunity. This is the first time I've actually been on your show. I know you've been on mine a couple times, but you're somebody that I love, I respect, and I really appreciate the work that you put out. So happy to be here.
Thanks a lot, Jesse. And from day one, we're talking months before the draft, you were on Trey Lance. You were telling me, Eric, dude, check out Trey Lance. This is going to be the guy. And, while I had an affinity for Justin Fields, it might have been a flaw in my process, because Justin Fields, he might have been a little bit more accurate, but Trey Lance's decision-making and just the mindset that he has from the quarterback position really sold me over. And we're going to start out with Trey Lance. And 49ers After Dark with Grant Cohn, you made it clear that you think Lance should and will start week one. And
sure.
It was so compelling, it had me convinced. So remind me and the audience why you think we should roll with Trey Lance week one.
Yeah, I mean, just the way that I look at it is the only edge that Jimmy G really has is experience. But when you break down that experience, he makes a ton of rookie mistakes. This is a guy that, let's really look at the 49ers offense as a whole. They're at their best when they're running play action. Yet your starting quarterback can't protect the ball, especially in those situations. As soon as he turns his back to the defense, fakes a handoff and turns back around, it's like he's completely lost on the field. He doesn't know where to go. Then you mix in that he doesn't have the arm strength that Lance has. He doesn't have the athleticism that Lance has. And quite frankly, I'm not even sure that he's a better decision maker, even though he is the veteran of the two. So if that's the case, why should Jimmy actually be the starter? And to Grant's point, if you can save yourself 24, 25 million and really build the depth of this team, and I don't want to get too deep into this portion of it because I actually just finished writing an article right before I came on here that will be published in the next 48 hours, but it compares 2019 versus 2021, and really the depth is what's lacking, but that depth can be gained if you cut Jimmy. And let's also go back to 2019. Jimmy G, for as good as he played in some people's eyes, there's a lot of things that were missing. 27 total touchdowns, 20 total turnovers. They had to take the ball completely out of his hands when it got to the playoffs. Halftime versus Minnesota, all the way through the NFC Championship, he hardly even had to make a play, and Shanahan didn't want him to make a play because he knew that Jimmy G might try to hand the ball over. So with all those things added in, I just feel like Trey Lance is right above the shoulders and can learn this offense very quickly. You see him working out with multiple teammates during the offseason, getting them on his side. So now that locker room division is no issue. I don't really see anything standing in the way of him being a starter. And one argument that I do hear is, well, if Jimmy's on this team, he's the veteran, he's the starter. No. He does not get to make the decision because he is not better than Trey Lance. If Trey Lance gets his stuff together and shows out, there's nothing that Jimmy G does better than Trey Lance. So there's no reason for him to be the starter.
I loved it. And you know what? I had my mind kind of set that Shanahan was going to roll with the vet. And you have me convinced that Trey Lance can do this thing. But Jesse, I think I have a way that we can get the best of both worlds.
Okay.
And Jimmy G, if he's not on our roster week 1, then we save the 25 mil, correct?
Yes.
So if we hold on to him as late as possible into the game, right, and cut him, what is the market for Jimmy G going to be? So whoever signs him would have to bring him in. He has to learn a whole new offense. Is he really going to be ready? But I mean, it would take him at least 5 or 6 weeks to learn the offense. And even then, he probably wouldn't have a full comprehensive. I mean, when the Niners traded for him, Shanahan made it clear that he got a dumbed down version of the offense, those 5 games that he started. So if we were to hold on to him as late as possible and cut him, how much can he get on the open market this year, right? Yeah. So here, Jesse, let me lay it out. I think there's a chance we could cut him and re-sign him. Or the way they might do it is renegotiate the contract, because Jimmy G's agent, he's no fool. So he might say, look, Jimmy, if they cut you outright right now on the open market, we might get 4 or 5 mil from one of these teams, but we're getting nowhere near the 25 mil the Niners were set to pay us. And what I could see happening is the Niners saying, hey, Jimmy, we want you around, but we can't keep you at 27 mil. Trey's looking really good. If that's the case, we're just going to turn it over to Trey. If you're willing to renegotiate this thing down to 10 mil, 12 mil, whatever that, we're playing limbo. How low can you go? How low can we get Jimmy to bite and take a pay cut to keep him on the roster? Because if we cut him, he's not gonna get nowhere near 15 mil. So if we renegotiate it, bring him down from the 27 to 15, maybe 10. Now you can roll with Jimmy to start the year, right? If he's not winning games, if he's not balling, immediately you turn it over to Trey. And now we don't have 27 mil on the bench. What do you think about that?
So here's what I'll say. I'm not a cap expert by any means. Like, there's other people that are way better at this than me. But my understanding of this is, if you restructure him, you are basically taking guaranteed money and pushing it off until minimum next year, which means a lot like what they did with D Ford, where it does free up money this year, but you're going to owe him that money next year. And that's where that issue
we
lies.
Definitely don't want to do that. We definitely do not want to do that. But Jesse, can we outright cut him so he's available to all 32 teams, and now we can re-enter the process saying, Jimmy, we'll pay you 15 mil or 10 mil, which is way cheaper than the 27 mil. Now we're saving a chunk of change. We're saving 17 mil on the cap, and we can still retain him because the 10 mil offer that we could theoretically give him is the best offer he has at this point.
I like where your head's at, and you're the type of guy in a franchise on Madden that waits till 3 a.m, cuts a player and re-signs him for cheaper because there's no renegotiation in that franchise. Listen, I think it's a fantastic idea. I just don't know if Jimmy's going to go for it, right? I mean, I feel like no team could other than the Bears with Trubisky, no team has disrespected their quarterback as much as the Niners have with Jimmy G. So he's a professional. He's a great teammate. Those are all things that are true about Jimmy. As much as I say that he shouldn't be the starter, he's done his job as far as being a leader and being a teammate on this team. But the moment that you cut him, I don't think he would be willing to do it. If he is, and you can talk to him beforehand, yeah, I'm all for that for sure.
This is something that just dawned on me, and it was your After Dark show with Grant that really got these wheels turning. I'm like, you know what? Trey Lance can start week 1. And not only that, a mobile quarterback brings a baseline he raises the baseline of the offense.
Yeah, of course he does.
Look at what Shanahan did with RG3, right? RG3, since the injury that rookie year, he's never been the same. And he's practically useless now without his legs being that elite level that they were back in 2012. But that team was a top 5 offense. And Jesse, when I was looking at the players on that 2012 roster the Redskins had, it was far inferior to what we have to work with on the 49ers.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a rookie running back, Alfred Morris, and the receivers, you had an aging Santana Moss, Pierre Garçon, Josh Morgan. It was Fred Davis was the tight end. Like what the Niners have to offer is so much more talented.
Oh yeah.
So you had me thinking that, you know what, we could turn this over to Trey and be all right. But I was thinking, man, is there a way we can get the best of both worlds? Because I really don't think if Jimmy hit the open market right now with the season about to start, he's not getting 10 mil anywhere. So we could offer that to him and say, Jimmy, you know what? We want you to be our starter. We will give you the chance to start if you take it. Yeah, it's not the 27 you were due. You might be salty about it, but it's better than the 5 or whoever. I don't even know who would go after him at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some teams would for 3, 4, 5, something like that, but not a lot.
Yeah.
I'll say this though too. Honestly, if Jimmy's gone, I'm totally cool with Rosen being the backup. I look at Rosen and I compare him to Mullins and Beathard, and I think he's a whole level above both of those guys. So I'm fine with him being the backup option if something were to happen to Trey Lance.
Absolutely. I love that. I had to throw out that theory because I was mulling that over yesterday, and I was like, man, you know what? That would be sweet. We could get Jimmy on at super discount.
Yeah.
Nobody would see that coming.
No, definitely not.
I want to move to the NFC North because I've been looking at all these teams across the NFL, Jesse, and I broke down all the AFC. I broke down the NFC West with Jordan. That episode was phenomenal. I had a lot of fun. And today we're looking at the NFC North. Let me pull this up here. I'm going to
let's
pull
look
up
at it.
the depth charts. We'll start out with the Bears.
Yes, sir.
That's the one. There we go. So the wide receiver core, Allen Robinson is a stud. Darnell Mooney, he's a good deep threat. He might be a great pairing with Justin Fields because we know Justin loves to throw the deep ball. And Darnell Mooney, man, that guy, he was open on some big plays last year. I saw a lot of them were missed. But do you have any opinion of Darnell Mooney? You've seen him before?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that he's been doing a lot of good things while they've had these little mini training camps, and him and Fields seem to have really good rapport. In fact, there was an article written about the connection between those two, and Mooney says as he was running a route, he was running like a dig, like a 20-yard dig or something like that. And he says, as the ball's in midair, he just has a smile on his face because of the way that Justin Fields can spin it. And he just felt like between the two, they have a great connection. And so, yeah, I mean, if nothing else, if you and the quarterback are on the same page, or you or the future franchise quarterback are on the same page, that bodes very well for you.
Absolutely. And that's why we're doing this. I'm looking at the roster. Damari Bird, I didn't realize he had joined them in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Riley Ridley, he's a youngster. So, and that's where Marquise Goodwin, looking down the depth chart, that's where Marquise Goodwin ended up.
Yeah, he ended up reverting back to the 49ers on that weird trade thing that happened with him because he didn't play last year. So that trade got reverted and he ended up on the 49ers roster. They end up cutting him and boom, here he is in Chicago.
Okay, now the offensive line, Tevin Jenkins, James Daniels, Cody Whitehurst, Ifedi. We know Ifedi from all his years in Seattle.
Seattle, yeah.
Elijah Wilkerson. What do you think about this O-line as a whole?
I love Tevin Jenkins. I think that was a fantastic pick. And the Bears, to me, honestly, when I broke it down, I want to say that I gave them, now it's been a couple weeks, but I want to say I gave them the best grade out of the whole draft. And the Bears, I think they just did a fantastic job. They moved up at the right time. They got Fields, who I definitely like, not as much as Trey Lance, but I do like him. and especially at the spot that they got him. And then Tevin Jenkins, to me, is an absolute mauler. So I loved that pick. But when I look at the offensive line, I'm not positive it's much better than last year. I mean, they made some big offseason cuts. And I know we haven't gotten to the defense yet, but they did the same thing in the secondary. And so they got some names there, but I don't know. I mean, we know who Ifedi is, right? But we also
Yeah.
are diehard fans who look at every single thing that goes on in the NFC West. Does anybody else know who Ifedi is, right? Like, that's not a household name. And so when you really
he
look
wasn't
at it,
particularly good for Seattle.
and he
I know
wasn't.
him for all the holding calls
Right.
and yeah.
Right. You're absolutely right. So with that being the situation, I don't think that they necessarily got better on the offensive line. Maybe they're just as good, but to me, that might be somewhere that they're going to struggle this year.
All right. There's still at the tight end position, Jimmy Graham, man, he's still useful, but he's not the same player that he used to be back in New Orleans.
No.
Cole Kmet, I know he's a young player. You have any opinion on Cole Kmet?
Yeah, well, I mean, how many tight ends did the Bears draft in the last season or two? Like, I swear they drafted like 5 tight ends last year. But no, Cole Kmet, if I remember correctly, was a first-round pick last year. They obviously thought very highly of him. And, I mean, he fits the bill as far as size and speed and all those things. But so do a lot of other guys that have come out of college at tight end that are highly regarded. We'll see if he pans out. He definitely wasn't worth where they drafted him. But him paired with Jimmy Graham, I think that is a formidable bunch, to say the least.
All right. Now, the quarterback position. They drafted Justin Fields, and you know what? I've always had a soft spot for Andy Dalton. Jesse, Andy Dalton actually won me my 2 quarterback fantasy league last year.
Okay,
I rode with Andy Dalton, and you know what? His last 3 or 4 games, he got it done. So I have a positive bias towards Andy Dalton. But how do you see that playing out between Dalton and Justin Fields?
I don't know why I've gone down this path with the Bears, but I've read a lot about them in the last week or two. And maybe in some weird world, I knew I was coming on the show to talk NFC North. I don't know. But either way, there are multiple articles talking about how Andy Dalton has been promised the starting job. So they promised him that before the draft. They've promised him that after the draft. So we'll see what that means and if that actually plays out that way. They don't owe him anything, right? But it would be weird to me if they pay the man upwards of $14 million on the open market to be a backup when you easily could have kept Mitchell Trubisky at a fraction of that price to compete for the starting job. So I don't know. I personally think he will be the starter. I don't know if that's the right move. I mean, I'm on board with the 49ers starting Trey Lance, and I think Justin Fields is pretty good. So I'm on board with them starting Justin Fields also.
Hey, you stick true to your guns, and I appreciate that. The running back room, David Montgomery, he's a good player, but I feel like now that I'm thinking about David Montgomery, I feel like I had always heard that the offensive line was struggling to create holes for that guy. And as we already mentioned, it doesn't look like they upgraded too much at the O-line. Tariq Cohen, he's a shifty pass catching back. I like Tariq Cohen. And then Damian Williams, I see he's back after opting out last year with Kansas City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tariq Cohen, to me, what was the guy for the Lions that was for like 2-3 years in a row got all the hype for fantasy? Was it Javid Best?
Yeah. Javid Best was the speedster, and then now Reddick was there, and we all know he's a little pass catcher. But you're thinking of Javid Best, the Cal product.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, I mean, Tariq Cohen is very Javid Best, right? I mean, every year he seems like a type of guy that could break out because he has breakaway speed, but they don't use him right. It's the strangest thing. I feel like put Cohen in the 49er offense, and oh my gosh, the things that Shanahan could do with him. But that's not the way that they operate in Chicago. And so the way that they use him, I think that he's completely useless to them. So let's X him out of it. Now, obviously, Damian Williams is coming back. Sounds like he's actually looking really, really good in camp. So that probably will end up being the second running back as far as the depth chart, long term for them. But Montgomery's a really good running back. It's just a matter of, can that offensive line hold up? And that I'm not quite sure about.
Absolutely. Let's move to the defense. And this defense, I feel like there's a lot of good players on this defense pulling it up here. I mean, I've always liked Akeem Hicks. He is just so tough inside. He was dinged up last year, and it showed. When he's not on the field, they are not the same defense. But he's joined by Khalil Mack, and Khalil Mack, I mean, has he tailored off a little bit, or is he still that perennial all-pro dominant pass rusher? What do you think, Jay?
How old is Khalil Mack? I swear he's like 34, but he's probably only like 30, 31 years old. But yeah, man, I don't know. The problem is with Khalil Mack is, and this is not his fault, but he just doesn't have that premier guy to go with him long term. It seems like every couple years he'll get someone that's a good running mate, and then they're gone. So Khalil Mack is still a very good player, but for what he's making and him aging the way that he is, and they're not giving him anybody opposite of him that's going to wreak havoc, I feel like he can be neutralized pretty easily. Now, you talked about Akeem Hicks. Akeem Hicks is 31 years old, I believe. He's in the last year of his deal. And there were rumors that he was going to be traded, and those rumors have crept back up slowly. His agent was given permission to seek a trade before the draft, and they were unable to find anybody. But he's still an option to be a trade candidate, so he may not even be on this team. We'll see. At any rate, he's in the last year of his deal, and I know he's not happy. So we'll figure out kind of what happens with that. But yeah, I mean, if you're just looking at the talent level on the defense, there's some very recognizable names for sure.
Yeah, and then outside of Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks on the D-line, I mean, Mario Edwards, he's been uninspiring. Bilal Nichols, there's not too much depth behind those guys. But let's move to inside linebacker because they got a good one. Roquan Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, he's right. He's in that tier with Fred Warner and Darius Leonard, Bobby Wagner. That's how highly I think of Roquan Smith.
Yeah, I mean, he's small, right? He's built like a today linebacker. He's probably 6 foot, 6'1", I imagine, 225-ish. But he plays really old school. Like, he's a Bears linebacker. If you think of Bears linebackers, he definitely fits that mold. And yeah, I like Roquan Smith an awful lot. And anytime that you have a very good middle linebacker that can put the defense in the right spots, a la Fred Warner, you see what happens. I mean, the 49ers were missing a lot of pieces, but as long as Fred Warner was there, they were good to go. And if I'm not mistaken, Roquan was injured for even the playoffs, and that's where they really started to kind of fall apart at the seams at the defensive level last year for the Bears.
That's a great point. And his running mates, Danny Trevathan, proven veteran, he's getting up there in age.
Yeah.
But let's move to the secondary, unless there's anything else you want to touch on at linebacker. You might be a big Jeremiah Tauchu guy. You never know with Jesse Naylor.
No, definitely not. I thought you just sneezed for a second.
Well, moving to the secondary, Desmond Trufant, Jalen Johnson. That's a young cornerback who played well last year.
Mm-hmm.
Tayshaun Gibson, and the other safety is the guy who, I mean, he was he was spoken about like a superstar. We're talking about Eddie Jackson.
Yeah.
And now, I don't know. I feel like I didn't hear from him much last year.
Yeah. No, you didn't. But Eddie Jackson is a very, very good player. Now, the issue that I have is, so Jalen Johnson, let's see how good he is when he's not opposite arguably the best corner in the league, right? And
Kyle Fuller was a really good player.
Yeah. So, you know what I mean? Like Fuller is a very good player. I get it. Like Fuller is, maybe last year he wasn't quite what he had been in the past, but he's a very, very good player. And so let's see what happens there. And then Eddie Jackson's good, but Trufant definitely did not play well in Detroit last year. He's probably at the very end of his career. Things happen quick once you start approaching that 30 age at corner. So we'll see what happens. I mean, there's some recognizable names for sure, but I don't think that secondary is very good, to be frank.
You know what? Yeah, looking at it, it's Eddie Jackson, and we'll have to see if Jalen Johnson's ready to take that next step as a CB1, because Trufant is not a CB1 at this point of his career.
No, he's definitely not that. That is for sure. So, we'll see. I mean, Jalen Johnson, what is this, year 2 for him?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, he may show out. I mean, maybe they know something we don't, and that's why they got rid of Fuller, but Fuller is a pretty damn good player. And again, the reasoning behind getting rid of him, they ate a lot of cap to do so. It's not like they ended up benefiting cap-wise. So I don't understand the reasoning, but maybe they know something that we don't. Maybe it's like a Kansas City situation with D Ford. He's got some lingering injuries. I'm not sure.
Yeah, only time will tell. Let's move to team number 2, and that's the Detroit Lions. And we'll start out at wide receiver, where they lost Kenny Golladay. And, man, yeah, it's not looking too good at receiver right now, Jesse. Tyrell Williams, he's been injured the last couple years. But, when he's on the field, he's a solid deep threat. So he's looking like Tyrell Williams is – I'm penciling him at wide receiver 1. Brashad Perriman, he's really up and down. He had that blazing 40-yard dash that got him a lot of hype. Useful in Madden, not useful on the field. They drafted the rookie Amon-Ra St. Brown. What did you think about Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I liked Amon-Ra St. Brown, and if I remember correctly, we were talking about some later receivers that the 49ers could take, and he was a guy that I brought up, pre-draft. So I definitely like him. The issue is that they went, if I remember correctly, they went defensive tackle followed by defensive tackle rounds 2 and 3, and they waited on taking a receiver, and you can tell by that receiving core, there's nothing to write home about. Quintez Cephas is a pretty good little player. But again, all of these guys that we're looking at are, either really good number 3s or horrible number 2s. Some of them are even number 4 type guys. So I struggle to figure out how these guys are going to create separation. So there's just not much to look at, in my opinion, at the receiver position.
Yeah. We are not fans of the wide receivers of the Detroit Lions. And I was actually lower on Amon-Ra St. Brown than a lot of other people. I didn't think that he was very explosive. He's useful, but he's not a special wide receiver in my opinion.
No, definitely not special. When you get a guy that late, he's not special. I again, if he was the second receiver they took in the draft, cool. I love it. But for that to be the first guy you took, it's not looking good in Detroit as far as the receiver position goes.
Now, the offensive line, I'm looking at it right here in front of me. It looks like a solid O-line. Taylor Decker's a good player. Penei Sewell, so you got the 2 bookend tackles. And then inside, Frank Ragnow is a name I recognize as a solid player. Jonah Jackson at left guard. Logan Steinberg at right guard. Looks like a pretty good offensive line to me. What do you think about it?
Yeah, and Steinberg's going to be battling it out with Vitae. I mean, that right there, that's going to be a training camp battle. We'll see who ends up getting that one. Vitae's paid a lot of money. He was brought over. He was a backup guard, if I remember correctly, with the Eagles, not last season, but the season before. And
the
they
Eagles
paid
had him at tackle. The Eagles used him everywhere because they were depleted across the offensive line.
That's true. That poor offensive line. So, yeah, he ended up breaking the bank and coming over and really didn't do much last year. So we'll see how that position pans out. But, yes, that line. And let's talk about the depth. I mean, Tyrell Crosby's back there as your swing tackle. I'll take him as a swing tackle, backup swing tackle. So that offensive line is going to be a problem for a lot of teams. And it is also the reason why it does worry me a little bit. Week 1, you're still trying to figure things out. The 49ers do go to Detroit. That offensive line can control the line of scrimmage now. So they might be an actual problem for the 49ers.
Interesting point. And I'm looking at the tight ends. They got a couple good tight ends, or at least one really good one. And I think Darren Fells, I mean, he got a lot of burn with the Houston Texans. He's a good tight end too. Yeah. So I mean, they're pretty good at tight end.
Yeah, TJ Hawkinson. I mean, this is a guy that came out of Iowa as well, Iowa State as well. Iowa, right? It's Iowa.
Iowa. Yeah.
Iowa, yeah, okay.
Because it was him and Fant. It was him and Fant. They had the duo.
Him and Fant. They came after Kittle. Yes, Iowa. But him and George Kittle trained a lot in the offseason, and he's looking different. His body has changed a lot from year 2 now to year 3, a lot like we saw with George Kittle from year 1 to year 2. So working out with guys like Kelsey and Kittle are only going to make you better, and I expect big things, especially with that receiving core being what it is, being a major weakness on that team. And I feel like Goff is going to be a check down king. Hawkinson might be a very, very good player this year. And I know we're not talking fantasy, but that's a guy that you may want to look at.
That's exactly where I was going. That was like, you know what? We just talked about the lackluster options at wide receiver. Hawkinson's a good player. He's going to get a lot of targets, man. I'm taking him. Him. All right, quarterback. They brought in Jared Goff. I mean, we know Jared Goff all too well. When he has the clean pocket and the receivers are running open, he can hit them. But as soon as that pocket starts condensing on him and he gets squeezed, he's not the same player.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And, we'll see what they do. Again, this is a whole new coaching staff. There's a lot of ex-players on that coaching staff. And I really think the Lions are definitely on the up. They're not going to be bottom dwellers for much longer, in my opinion. But this is a transition year for them. There's definitely going to be some struggles. And we'll see what Goff's made of. Listen, he was left for dead over in LA. And a lot of times, guys have something to prove. And I feel like Goff may be a guy that actually has a pretty good year and proves a little bit more than what we all thought of him to be, just because he has that chip on his shoulder. And I don't think he's going to be great by any means, but he might be better than what we gave him credit for. And we'll see this year.
Definitely. And looking at the running backs, DeAndre Swift, I've always had an affinity for Jamal Williams. I always thought he ran hard.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that duo? Because I don't know much about Jamar Jefferson or Dedrick Mills. So it looks like a 2-man punch for me.
Yeah, so Jamar Jefferson came from Oregon State. He was, I believe, a 7th round pick this year, if I'm not mistaken. And Lions fans are actually pretty big on this guy, so we'll see what happens. But Jamal Williams, yes, I think he's definitely going to be splitting time with Swift. It's a running back by committee, and they're a perfect duo. One is an absolute hammer, and the other one is going to outquick you. So I think that they, with that offensive line, really could be a lot. They could be a handful for a lot of teams. And I expect them to be running the ball 55% of the time probably this season. And both of those guys are going to get some really good burn because of it.
All right. Moving to the defense. Trey Flowers, remember he had that huge, it was a contract year with the New England Patriots, right?
Yeah.
And the Lions signed him to that massive deal. I haven't heard much about him since, to be honest, Jay. I don't know. I couldn't tell you if he's been balling or not. But Michael Brockers, that's a guy that the Rams are going to miss because I always thought he was doing the dirty work on the inside. He's a real tough inside player. So I like Michael Brockers. To round out this D-line, John Penasini, Romeo Okwara. That's a name I recognize.
Onzarwiki.
Yeah. So what do you think about this defensive line?
It's crazy because I look at all these names and I know every single player on this defense, and it's because my co-host Rad is a diehard Lions fan, and we just sit up and talk about our teams and position group battle. So I'm looking at this whole team and I know it, and so maybe I'm a little biased because I know all the names, and that's not normal when you look at a random
Rad's
team.
Hyping up his guys. Don't buy into it. It's just Rad hyping up his guys.
Yeah, man. So listen, the biggest question mark that I have with this defense is, listen, they brought in Ali McNeil, and they really bolstered the defensive line, right? But Trey Flowers, kind of to your point, has had some down years. They were a dumpster fire as far as a coaching staff last year. Jeff Okudah came out and said, and I don't think he meant any disrespect for it, and I don't even know if he realized what he said, but he basically said, wow, it's really nice. I'm picking up a lot this offseason just because we're watching a lot of film and breaking it down. And I'm thinking to myself, did you not do that last year? Your coaches weren't coaching you at all. So I don't take a lot from Trey Flowers maybe not being a guy that wreaked a lot of havoc. That said, I don't think he's ever played strong side linebacker ever. And they're going to be running a 3-4 there, or at least a hybrid version. And so I'm very curious to see how Flowers is used and if he can fit that mold. That, I think, is really going to be the linchpin of that defense and whether or not they're going to have success or not.
Interesting. Now, moving to the linebacker position, Jelani Tavai. That's a name I recognize. Jamie Collins. I mean, my grandfather remembers watching Jamie Collins back when he was on the Patriots. I mean, but he's still getting it done. He's still getting that contract. And to round out the linebacker core, Jalen Reeves-Maybin. What do you think? What do you know about these linebackers?
Yeah, listen, that right there is the issue. So I just talked about how that offensive line can really control teams and are going to give the 49ers problems in week 1. However, I don't know how they're going to keep good running teams off the field because that linebacking core is extremely suspect. And you get a team like the 49ers coming into town that can run all over you. I think that those linebackers are going to be put in bad positions, and that's where they're going to get beat ultimately because I don't believe that linebacking core can hold up. And that's really a position that they're going to have to address. It's a big reason why a lot of people thought that Parsons would end up going to the Lions. And, it's still a weakness for them. And they are in a bit of a rebuild. So we'll see how they address that going forward. But as of this year, that linebacking core might be almost as bad as that receiving core.
Moving to the secondary, Jeff Okudah was a guy we mentioned. He was a top 5 pick, and I really liked him coming out. But he had a bad year last year. We remember the game where Davante Adams just torched him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that hurt him mentally, but it felt like he never recovered after that.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, I mean, he was put in a lot of bad positions last year, a lot of bad situations. They had him covering top-notch receivers, going man-to-man with these guys. That whole secondary was completely injured last year. Again, the coaching staff was a dumpster fire. It's a COVID year. There was a lot going against him. I think he's going to bounce back. And the reason that I think that is because when I take him just coming out of college and I put him in this year's secondary class, outside of one guy, I feel like he would have been the second best corner in this class. So I have a lot of belief in Okudah. I think that he's going to bounce back. He's going to be okay. And with the right coaching there, I believe Aaron Glenn is their secondary coach, ex-player. So I believe that that'll do him very well.
All right, and rounding out the secondary, they got Will Harris and Tracy Walker at safety.
Mm-hmm.
And opposite of Okudah, I see a Corn Elder and Amani Oruware.
Yeah.
And that's where Melifonwu went. I know, that was Sam's guy. The pick right before we took Embry Thomas. Would you have preferred Melifonwu? Do you think the Niners might have been eyeing Melifonwu at that pick?
I believe that they were. Definitely, I believe that they were. I mean, I think that they were okay getting Embry Thomas, but I think if you just look at the size, the speed, I mean, everything that he brings to the table, that has to be a guy that you were looking at for sure. But don't sleep on Oruware now. I believe he was brought in to be a nickel corner last year. If I'm not mistaken, this might be his second year as well. I'm not sure. Let's see. How long has he been? This is his, third year. This is his third year. He broke out in a big way last year. He's a pretty dang good player. So he, I believe, really out of all of them has already kind of solidified himself. So I think the secondary is going to be just fine this year.
Interesting. And make sure you're taking these mental notes because I'm going to ask you who you think is going to win this NFC North. But let's move to the Green Bay Packers, where the wide receiver core, we know they got the monster, the man himself out of Fresno State, Davante Adams. Allen Lazard is a player. I like Allen Lazard. Big body. Big body. I feel like he can win downfield. Amari Rodgers is an interesting player out of Clemson, right? Feels like a slot guy. Good after the catch. And man, Jesse, I don't know what you know about EQ St. Brown, but when he was coming out of Notre Dame, I was speaking of me being low on Amon-Ra St. Brown, I was high on EQ St. Brown because he was 6'5", 6'6". He's got this massive size. It reminded me of Plaxico Burress, but that's a guy he's been really dinged up this first 3 years in the NFL. So at this point, I don't know what you can expect from EQ St. Brown. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I mean, he's useful, but he's got the dropsies. I'm not a big Valdez-Scantling guy. What do you think about this receiving core? Yeah,
I mean, I wonder if Packer fans are looking at St. Brown the same way that we're looking at Jalen Hurd and saying, if only, right? This is the year. So I don't know. We'll see if anything goes on with him. But yeah, I mean, the receivers are good enough, right? I mean, Davante Adams is at worst a 3, maybe 5 receiver overall. That's at the very worst. Some people think he's the best. So he's an absolute baller, and that opens up the rest of the pass game for everybody else. So yeah, I think that they're good. They're good enough to win with. For sure.
Excellent. Now moving to the O-line, the left tackle. When he's healthy, he's one of the best left tackles in the NFL. David Bakhtiari,
a dog,
and he had an injury, right? Is he? I'm not sure. I probably should have brushed up. Is he going to miss some time?
I don't know if he's actually going to miss any time. I think that he should be ready to go, but Yeah, I haven't brushed up on it either to know for sure. I would
Yeah.
imagine
Well,
he's going to play though.
yeah, he's a really good player. And so he's joined by John Runyon at left guard, Eldon Jenkins. They lost the center who went to the Chargers, the guy who you wanted, right? You were clamoring for him.
Yes.
Who was it? Who was it? His name's
Lindsley.
escaping me right now.
Yeah,
Lindsley.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So they lost a key piece at center. Patrick Lucas Patrick is penciled in. Man, this O-line isn't looking too hot right now, Jay. Billy Turner. I mean, what? Unless you're seeing something I'm not. What do you think about this O-line? I mean, outside of Bakhtiari, right? Left tackle is locked down. But some of these names, Jesse, what are you thinking?
Well, and they've got a rookie at Josh Myers playing center. That was a questionable pick. Listen, the Green Bay Packers, this whole division, if you really look at it, they all drafted well except for Green Bay. They did a horrible job in this draft. And it's no surprise why Aaron Rodgers might want out. I don't know. Green Bay always seems to figure it out on the offensive line. I don't know who their coach is, but it seems like...
Let me tell you why. You why, Jay.
Yeah, please do.
Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that guy knows how to move the pocket, man. This guy will dip out, weave in, squeeze through a hole, and now he broke the pocket and he's throwing a 40-yard bomb down the sideline to Jordy Nelson.
Totally fair. Listen, that very well could be it. And Aaron Rodgers, bless you, my man, because you've gotten a lot of offensive linemen paid. So good job to you. But yeah, that offensive line is definitely a question for me, for sure.
All right, moving to tight end, Robert Tonyan. He flashed last year. I know that's Kittle's boy. They work out a lot together from what I've heard. Mercedes Lewis, another dinosaur getting it done, more of a blocking guy. Sternberger, he's suspended for some games. Any thoughts on these tight ends?
Yeah, they're meh.
Yeah.
You know, again, another position group that Aaron Rodgers seems to figure out how to get guys paid more than what they deserve. So, yeah, they're all right.
Yeah. You know what? We got to move to the quarterback position because it's almost like when you do this breakdown, you have to do it with a caveat because nobody knows what the heck's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. No. And that is the difference between the Packers being contenders and pretenders.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is arguably a top 5 quarterback of all time. And who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, I feel like cooler heads are probably going to prevail there, and Aaron Rodgers will end up playing. He's running towards the end of his career, and he can act. I get it. He doesn't, quote unquote, need football, but I think he wants football. And because of that, I believe that he'll end up playing and things will be fine. But if he's not, I wonder what Jordan Love brings to the table, because it sounds from a lot of people that are plugged in, it doesn't sound like he would be ready to play, which is a scary proposition for a guy that you spent a first-round pick on and has already sat for a year.
That pick, Jesse, made absolutely no sense to me. None. And if I was Aaron Rodgers, I'd be freaking furious. You're telling me we have a Super Bowl caliber team. I'm in the middle of my prime, under contract for multiple years, and you're going to use the first-round pick on a quarterback? Really? I can't even blame Aaron Rodgers for being furious. That GM, whoever, the CEO who just said Aaron Rodgers is a difficult fella or some quote like that. And you know what? Fire all of them. I'm picking Aaron Rodgers over all those dudes.
Yeah, for sure. I had to check out the comment section real quick. Tommy's always holding me accountable, man. Whether it's my intro on Grant's show, it made him lose respect for me. Now I'm smoking dope if I think Lance is starting week 1. My guy, were you with me? I'm gonna answer what you said with a question. Were you with me on Lance being the pick? I want to know what side of the fence you were on with that, Tommy. You got to let me know.
Hey, you know what? I'm on Tommy's good side because I watched him play some of his guitar videos. Mm-hmm. So I'm on, and I told him about it. So I'm on Tommy's good side. Thanks for coming
Listen,
by, Tommy.
Tommy, it's all love with Tommy. You know what I mean? He's a like I said, he'll hold you accountable, but at the end of the day, he always supports you. And you may not like what he has to hear, but sometimes you got to hear it anyways. You know,
We got such a strong community
we do
that we've built, with Last Second Sports, Grant. We could go on. The list goes on and on.
for sure.
It's a phenomenal community. But I want to speed things up because we're at the 50-minute mark.
For sure. Okay, let's get through it.
Running back, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, the big powerful guy. I mean, that looks like a dynamic duo right there, right? A.J. Dillon's got to get a lot more burn this year.
Absolutely, he does. Definitely does. I was shocked that they were able to afford Aaron Jones and were able to bring him back. So kudos to them. I don't know if he would have really got the money that they thought he was worth on the open market, but to them, he's absolutely worth it. He's a very good player for what they need on that team.
We talked about the quarterback position. Where's the quarterback position? Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love. Let's move to the defense, where I'm seeing Dean Lowry at D end, Kenny Clark on the interior, Tyler Lancaster, Rashawn Gary out of Michigan. Is he going to, first round pick? Is he going to take a step for depth pieces? Kiki Kinsley, phenomenal name. Don't know the guy. Delonte Scott to Daryl Slayton. So when I'm looking at it, okay. I was going to say, where's Zadarius Smith? But they got him at linebacker because they run the 3-4. So he's pass rushing a lot. They picked up Devondre Campbell from Arizona. That's a linebacker I've always liked. Good in coverage, decent against the run. I didn't realize that he joined the Packers.
Well, it's funny because you like Campbell. I like Daryl Slayton. I mean, that's not a guy that a lot of people probably know, but he came out of Florida and he was one of my late round sleepers. He's a big body, and I think he's perfect to come in and spell Kenny Clark. I think the defense is a good defense. There's a lot of names there that are recognizable, but again, overall, I wonder if they've really done enough or anything, quite frankly, to stop what has been their bugaboo for two years running. We saw it with the 49ers in 2019. We saw it with the Bucs in 2020. They're very finesse. And I believe teams like that are still going to be able to ultimately break their backs in the run game. And that's going to be their issue again this year.
And it feels like the Niners are getting even more powerful and more stout on the offensive line to combat these guys.
Yeah, absolutely, they are.
Yeah. Moving to the secondary, man, they got arguably the best corner in the league, Jair Alexander, right here at left corner. Darnell Savage, I really like Darnell Savage. This is a good secondary looking at it here. Jesse?
Oh, very.
Adrian Amos. I mean, Kevin King. I don't think Kevin King's quite lived up to the hype, but that's why they spent, I believe it was the second round pick on Eric Stokes.
For sure they did. No, I mean, Stokes might have been their first round pick. I'm almost positive.
Did they take him in the first? I know
they got him
early.
Late first. Yeah,
Okay.
A little bit of a reach in my opinion. Josh Jackson's another name that just never really panned out. They drafted him the same year. They got Jair.
Jesse, I got to tell you, I was a huge Josh Jackson guy. I absolutely loved him coming out of Iowa. His ball skills, every time he's running with the wide receiver and that ball is in the air, he was locating it and intercepting it. Former wide receiver. Actually, before I was this big YouTube star, I was saying that, man, the Niners should go get Josh Jackson from the Packers because he had a slow start to his career. And, I mean, that never manifested. But, man, that's a blast from the past because I really liked Josh Jackson.
I loved Josh Jackson. If you remember, they took him and Jair was injured, I believe, coming out of Louisville. And so most people thought Josh Jackson was going to be the guy, and then they hoped that Jair panned out. Well, that ended up being completely opposite. Jair Alexander, for my money, might be the best corner in the league. And that secondary is very good. Yet another reason why you need to run the ball. Any team that does not have a dominant run game, they are going to struggle against the Packers because those Smith boys can get after the quarterback, and then that secondary is always feasting.
Hey, we're moving to this last team here as soon as this loads. It's going to be the Minnesota Vikings. And we can finally get to Waruna's question because we're on the last team. Waruna's been asking, who's the best? There it is. He's asked a few times, who is the best QB in the division? Not leaving without an answer. And I know Waruna, he's the biggest Kirk Cousins fan. He might like Kirk Cousins even more than Kyle Shanahan.
That might be true.
All right, let's look at this wide receiver core. They had the phenomenal rookie Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. He's another guy. He just runs some sick routes. His route running is so sick, Jesse. He can just leave people in the dust. But let's see what they have outside of those two. Now they use a lot of two wide receiver sets, just like the Niners do. But deeper than that, Olabisi Johnson, Chad Beebe. I mean, am I missing something here? They're not looking too deep at receiver outside of those two guys, Jesse.
No, I mean, is Chad Beebe, is that Don Beebe's son?
I couldn't tell you.
I couldn't tell you either. And then Prohl, that's another name that I remember from the early 2000s, I swear.
Oh, yeah, Ricky Prohl?
Yeah.
Ricky Prohl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if these guys are from those family trees, but names that I definitely recognize. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, but when you have two receivers that are as good as Jefferson and Thielen, I don't know if you could really ask for more as a quarterback.
You're right. That is a really good duo, probably in the top 5 range if we're talking wide receiver duos. Off the top of your head, you think you agree with that?
Oh, yeah.
Somewhere in the top 5, top 10, right? Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Easily, yes.
Yeah. So let's go to the offensive line. Christian Darrisaw is a rookie. I know he's big and stout. He should hold it down at left tackle. Ezra Cleveland, another young player. Garrett Bradbury, Dakota Dozier. You also have Wyatt Davis there behind him. So that's probably going to be a battle. And then Brian O'Neill. Any thoughts on this O-line as a whole?
Yeah, listen, they've invested a lot of early picks the last couple of years into that offensive line, and I expect that offensive line is going to be much improved going forward. But young players tend to struggle in a lot of positions, so we'll see if it's super stout this year. But I think they're doing the right thing as far as building that team from the inside out. So kudos to the Vikings for doing just that.
I agree. And, they have theoretically their quarterback of the future in Kellen Mond. So they got the offensive line built. Kirk Cousins, a good quarterback for now. I mean, this is a team. I've always had an infatuation with Mike Zimmer, with Coach Zimmer and the double A gap scheme. I've always loved the double A gap, how he sticks those linebackers right over the center. And you don't know if they're dropping, if one of them's blitzing. It creates havoc. And I feel like Mike Zimmer was kind of the trendsetter with that double A gap. Yeah,
he was. In fact, Robert Saleh in 2019 really started to use that method. Now, he didn't use it as well because I felt like every time he went double A gap, they both just dropped into coverage because they were running cover 4 behind and they weren't a man team. But he did definitely start to use it quite a bit. And early on, it definitely gave some teams fits because they didn't know what was happening.
Absolutely. I definitely remember that. And Fred Warner's, he's the right guy who could do that because dropping back from that position, it takes a certain skill set. And with Fred's awareness, that's something he can do. I wonder if D'Amico is going to bring that aspect to the defense. But I want to touch on this tight end because I'm a big Irv Smith Jr. guy. This is another guy in fantasy. If you're waiting for a tight end, I mean, we talked about the 2 wide receivers they got, not much after that. Irv Smith might be like that third target option for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I mean, he does like his tight ends. Rudolph was pretty good. So if they got rid of Rudolph, that tells you all you need to know about Irv Smith, who they drafted just a couple years ago, I believe 2019, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, Irv Smith is going to be a pretty good player, I imagine, this year.
Yeah. Well, we touched on Kirk and Kellen Mond. the running back. Dalvin Cook, he is so special, Jesse. The way he makes people miss, he's not a guy who's going to string together several. He makes you miss in a phone booth. It's like the way it's just so subtle. He's got these subtle jukes that are just so elusive. I really love Dalvin Cook's running style.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook is an absolute beast. The only question with him has always been health, and last year he was able to stay relatively healthy. So barring health, sounds like we're talking about the 49ers here. He's an absolute dog.
All right, let's move to this defense because I got some questions about it. On the D-line, Stevan Weatherly, Michael Pierce, Dalvin Tomlinson's the big guy in the middle, Danielle Hunter. He's a phenomenal player, but he's got a back injury, and we know these back injuries are just so darn tricky. Backing up them, Patrick Jones, Armon Watts, Sheldon Richardson still getting a job. What do you think about this D-line?
Yeah, listen, not a lot of depth, but they did take care of the Hunter situation. That was something that was going to boil over, and they needed to get things right as far as getting the contract figured out and getting him back with the team and into camp and all those things. So that was a smart move on their part. You know, if he's healthy, Hunter is, I mean, talk about wreaking havoc. That dude can absolutely do it on his own. Great player. So that was a big smart move by that team.
Moving to the linebacker core, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks. I mean, I know Anthony Barr is really good in Madden. Yeah. I'm a Madden guy. Eric Kendricks. Now, he's just a phenomenal player outright. I mean, you know, we were talking about that 2019 Minnesota game. I was at that game, Jay.
Yeah.
And Eric Kendricks, I mean, Jimmy is one of those throws. Jimmy thought he could get it over him. No, you couldn't. And then from there on out, Shanahan was dialing up runs the rest of the way. But Eric Kendricks, phenomenal linebacker.
Yeah, listen, they also went in and brought in Chaz Surratt. They drafted Troy Dye out of Oregon. I believe that those guys went round 3, round 4. So they are making sure that they're bolstering up that linebacking core. We talked about the Lions' weakness there. Well, this is a major strength for them. Anthony Barr, however, he is a big name. He makes good money. He really took a backslide last year. And I know Vikings fans in the offseason, he was almost their version of Eric Armstead. They wanted to get rid of him. They feel like he's not living up to his contract, and they wanted to run him out of town. He's still there. We'll see if he can bounce back. But if he doesn't, they definitely have a couple other guys there that could step in and be impact players.
I like how you talked about the depth because I hadn't looked that deep. And Chaz Surratt, that was a name I did see popping up. A lot of people liked him coming into this year's draft. Moving to the secondary, they brought in Pat Pete. This is where Pat Pete ended up, and he's going to be opposite Jeff Gladney, who's a young corner, and backing them up. Oh, Cam Bynum. He's a Bay Area boy out of Cal. I liked him coming out. Rashad Breeland. So it looks like they got some decent depth. Cameron Danzler. And we know the veteran Harrison Smith. I mean, he's been a really good player for a long time in this league. And Xavier Woods will round out the secondary. It looks pretty good to me. What do you think about this secondary?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a decent secondary. We'll see how they hold up against some of those receivers that are burners. Patrick Peterson to me has always been a huge name, but I think that his one-on-one coverage skills, in my opinion, have always been a bit overrated. I felt like he was a guy that could get laced up by the right receivers, and he's definitely aging. But if he can rewind the clock just a little bit, maybe a la Richard Sherman type of year in San Francisco 2019, maybe he can look pretty good this year. So we'll see.
Jesse, you know what? You absolutely nailed it, and that's going to do it for this this NFC West. Let me go ahead and switch that up a little bit. Hey, Jesse, now we just examined the depth charts of all these teams in the NFC North.
Yes. And
I'm going to ask you, and there's a caveat, okay? So it's almost like what's going on with Rodgers, right? So we might have
Yeah.
to do like a double answer. At least I will. Who do you think's going to win this division?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that Aaron Rodgers is going to play, like I said earlier. So I'm going to go in this order. I'm going to go Packers, Vikings, Bears, Lions. But I feel like that Bears Lions is closer than what people want to give it credit for.
You know what? Just to be contrarian, and since I'm a Mike Zimmer guy and I've always liked Kirk Cousins, because for years I was telling people, look, Kirk Cousins is better than Jimmy Garoppolo. And I had to listen to my friends say, Eric, you're freaking crazy. Jimmy G's way better. And now I think it's pretty darn clear that Kirk Cousins was the superior player.
Yes, of course.
So you know what? To be contrarian, because I like Irv Smith. I just like a lot of guys on the Vikings. I don't know why. Dalvin Cook, Irv Smith, Justin Jefferson, Thielen. I'm rolling with the Vikings. Maybe Rodgers doesn't play. I don't know. I don't know what's going to go on. It's going to be hard to predict. But I'm going to say Vikings will win the division, followed by Packers, Bears, and then the Lions. I think they're going to be picking early next year, Jay.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. They got a tough schedule. The one thing that I do want to say, though, is you just talked about Kirk Cousins, and I think people sleep on him. You know, we did our top 10 quarterbacks a few months back, and I had him at number 10, and the crew cooked me for it. And we went back and forth for 5 to 10 minutes. But you look at Kirk Cousins over the last 3 years, okay? 69.5% completion percentage, 3.5 to 1 TD to INT ratio. I mean, this man puts up really good numbers. And unlike Jimmy G, he's not just throwing checkdowns all day long. He has a deep ball on him, right? So he is a lot better than what people want to give him credit for. Kirk Cousins is a dog.
I agree, Jay. Hey, thank you so much for coming on. If somehow you're subscribed to me and not subscribed to Last Second Sports, which I wouldn't be able to fathom, but if someone exists out there, make sure you check out Last Second Sports with my man Jesse, his whole team. They're absolutely killing it. Your channel, the rise has just been astounding to watch.
It's been a lot of fun, man. I mean, we're just passing the 4-month mark, and we're almost at 2,000.
Coming up on 2K. You're coming up on 2K.
It's crazy.
I've been side eyeing a little bit. Hey,
the love
job.
The love has been phenomenal. So yes, thank you to everybody.
And you know what? And I thank you because you're always showing me love and supporting me. So I appreciate that, Jay. That's going to round it out. Thank you guys for, Cheyenne. That's too kind. That is too kind. Thank you, Cheyenne. Thank you to everyone who came in and was chatting. The chat was live. Sorry I couldn't read everyone's comments because this thing was flying and we were trying to get through these depth charts. But hey, I hope you have a great rest of your night, Jesse. Thanks for coming out, and I'll catch you next time.